L. McKinney's positively singular graphic novel, Nubia Real One, brings the titular DC character into the modern day as a black high school student working to balance being a person with superpowers within a world which would assume those powers to be a threat solely due to the race of their owner. The graphic novel follows Nubia's journey through a particularly fraught part of her life, wherein she is pushed forth into situations of conflict, wherein she is drawn to bringing justice for those around her, and then into periods of afterward of healing and of community building after the trauma of that conflict. Hello, my name is Joel Cribb, and today I'll be looking at a few examples where the use of that color is brought into conjunction with panel composition and the author's voice to create a narrative of conflict involvement followed by healing and growth to highlight a similar real-world cycle being continually experienced by the Black community today. To best illustrate how the use of color feeds much of the tone and focus of the story, we'll look at a later point in the story, after Nubia's drive to pursue justice has begun to fully take the place of her trepidations around doing so. Here, Nubia and her friends have organized and attended a protest, and after interlopers intervene, the scene gets chaotic and Nubia and her friends are held up by the police. As a whole, McKinney's graphic novel is colored by a lot of soft pastels and has a fairly soothing palette. In addition, these colors are generally derived from the colors representative of Wonder Woman herself, red, blue, and yellow. So there's a lot of pinks, a lot of softer blues, and yellows approaching off-white. In this scene, when Nubia takes action for justice, the colors repeatedly shift to high contrast, and many panels adapt a simplified impact frame style, to borrow a term from the manga and anime world. After Nubia has a moment here where she spiritually shrinks back and the panels become more claustrophobic and contained, before those panels frames open up as she takes action to rescue her friends from the poorly mistaken police. As McKinney explains in an interview with the internet outlet The Mary Sue, Nubia doesn't get to be the golden child. She doesn't get to the benefit of the doubt. The protest scene in Nubia, therefore, specifically highlights this real world dynamic wherein black teens are often denied any opportunity to be viewed as heroic or innocent and are instead criminalized out of hand. Following the way things might ideally happen in the real world, these high intensity scenes of protracted physical action are followed in the comic by a period of community building and personal healing, which are hallmarked by a palette of softer pastels and in particular shades of purple. These purple periods are, for the character Nubia, periods in which the characters reconnect and process what has happened while building a deeper community with one another through their shared experience. By using the color purple, a color described by the National Museum of African American History and Culture as a color which has been used to signify beauty, royalty, faith, prosperity, and healing, as well as being strongly connected to African American culture, McKinney further connects to the hearts of her characters who are often hurting or seeking comradeship in these segments. These later scenes appear to show a Nubia who has decided that she is somebody who stands for justice, and her active pursuit of that justice shows up in scenes with colors as bold as the action she takes. As important as contrast is later in the comic, however, its absence similarly serves the tone of the story in the beginning, as Nubia is still finding herself. In contrast to later events, when Nubia is forming her sense of purpose and responsibility, an earlier confrontation takes place with a familiar foe, which does not end in bombast and bright color. One of Nubia's classmates, Quentin, accosts her friend in the hallway, but Nubia, fresh from her run-in with the police, makes the call not to act, to not use her powers to both their advantage. In comparison to opportunities she takes later, her choice to remain passively hostile is made out of a need for self-conservation. Also conservative here is the use of color in a moment of conflict. Usually, when Nubia has been presented with an opportunity to act for justice or some other related inflection point, the art style will use bold, dark black lining and bright neon colors. But here, the moment in the hallway is punctuated by more soft, passive tones and more subtle inking as Nubia's friend finds a softer way out of the situation and things fall once more into one of these purple periods of rebuilding and community. The way artist Robyn Smith depicts this scene is not ramping up into some vivid, fateful climax, but rather remaining at a low simmer until it puffs out, emphasizes the way black women, while being expected to be strong and hold entire families and communities together alone, are also often expected by American society to be submissive and passive once their strength appears to impede the whims of anybody else. Through McKinney and Smith's retreatment of the character Nubia in Nubia Real One, the classic superhero narrative meets complications when the experience is being lived by a young black character. The graphic novel's combination of classic plot lines with modern racial concerns, as well as its use of color, could take a world where heroism is conditional and often quite concerned with color itself. Nubia Real Ones asks its readers to think, what does a powerful person look like? And what does justice mean? In doing so, it holds up a mirror to real world inequities and shows what real world resistance can look like.